Gunfire shattered the stained glass windows of St. Jude's Cathedral, raining colourful shrapnel over the panicked wedding guests. Amidst the chaos, as men in tailored suits drew concealed weapons, Kate stared in horror at the man holding her hand. He wasn't just a quiet student, and she wasn't an orphan. The rain was coming down in sheets across the Chicago skyline, turning the sprawling campus of Loyola University into a bleak grey painting. Inside the Cudahy Library, the air was thick with the scent of damp wool coats and stale coffee. Kate Hayes shifted the heavy textbook in her arms, her eyes scanning the crowded study hall. Every wooden table was packed with desperate students cramming for midterms. She was 20 years old, a nursing major, surviving on a mountain of student loans and exhausted down to her bones. Her mother, Sarah, had passed away 8 months prior, leaving Kate entirely alone in the world. In the far corner, tucked away behind a row of towering oak bookshelves, sat a solitary figure. Leo Russo didn't look like a typical college student. At 22, he possessed a quiet, dangerous stillness that made people instinctively give him a wide berth. He wore a dark, tailored peacoat, and his dark eyes were fixed not on the open laptop in front of him, but on the reflections in the tall glass windows. Leo was a numbers runner and a low-level enforcer for the Costa family, a brutal crime syndicate currently fighting a turf war over the Calumet River ports. He was enrolled in classes solely as a front, a way to launder his time and explain his presence in the city, while the heat died down from a warehouse bust on the south side. Kate approached his table, her knuckles white as she gripped her nursing textbook. "Can I sit with you?" she whispered. Leo's gaze snapped from the window to her face. He took in her damp chestnut hair, the dark circles of exhaustion under her bright hazel eyes, and the oversized sweater that looked like it belonged in a thrift store. He gave a single curt nod and gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "Thanks," Kate breathed, practically collapsing into the seat. "It's a madhouse in here today." "Midterms," Leo replied, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. He didn't look at her, his eyes drifting back to the perimeter of the room. That was when Leo saw them. 2 men were standing near the reference section. They were in their late 40s, wearing expensive dark overcoats that failed to hide the thick, muscular builds of men who made their living with their hands. Leo's heart skipped a fraction of a beat. He recognized the man on the left, Thomas Graziano, a known ruthless hitman and trusted capo for Dominic Maroney, the undisputed boss of the Chicago outfit and the Costa family's sworn enemy. Leo instinctively tensed his hand, drifting beneath his coat toward the cold steel of the 9mm tucked into his waistband. Had the Maronis found him? Was this a hit? But Graziano wasn't looking at Leo. He was looking at the girl. "I'm Kate, by the way," she said, pulling a highlighter from her bag, completely oblivious to the apex predators standing 50 feet away. Leo slowly moved his hand away from his weapon. "Leo." "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else, Leo," Kate noted with a small, weary smile. "Don't worry, I won't talk your ear off. I just need to memorize the cardiovascular system before my brain melts." Leo studied her. She was completely unguarded. He watched as Graziano subtly shifted his position to keep Kate in his line of sight, while the second man checked the fire exit. They weren't hunting. They were guarding. "You from the city?" Leo asked carefully, keeping his tone casual. "Born and raised," Kate said, highlighting a block of text. "Just me and my mum. She was a nurse at St. Luke's. Passed away last year. Never knew my dad. Mum said he was a traveling salesman who died in a car wreck before I was born. Typical sob story, right?" Leo's mind raced piecing together fragments of underworld lore. 20 years ago, Dominic Maroney survived an assassination attempt outside a local hospital. Rumor had it, a civilian nurse saved his life, and for a brief, reckless period, the ruthless Mafia Boss had fallen in love. The streets whispered that Maroney had a child, a ghost kept entirely separated from his empire of blood and extortion, protected by an invisible wall of his best men. Leo looked at the struggling, exhausted college student sitting across from him. She was stressing over textbook prices and anatomy exams, completely unaware that her biological father controlled half the politicians in the state, including Alderman Richard Davies, and possessed a net worth in the hundreds of millions. Kate Hayes was Dominic Maroney's daughter. "I'm sorry about your mum," Leo said softly, the weight of his discovery settling heavily on his shoulders. "It's okay." Kate smiled, a genuine warm expression that made Leo's chest tighten in a way he wasn't accustomed to. "I'm surviving." Leo glanced back at Thomas Graziano, who was now glaring daggers at him from across the room. "If only you knew," Leo thought, "you're sitting with the enemy." 3 weeks vanished in a blur of shared coffees, late-night study sessions, and quiet conversations along the lakefront. Despite his better judgment, Leo found himself hopelessly drawn to Kate. She was everything his world wasn't: kind, transparent, and entirely innocent. For the first time in his life, Leo felt a desperate urge to walk away from the Costa family, to disappear into a normal life, where his biggest worry was an anatomy exam rather than a grand jury indictment. But the Mafia does not let its soldiers simply walk away. On a freezing Thursday evening, Leo was summoned to a meatpacking facility in the Fulton Market District. The air inside smelled sharply of raw beef ammonia and cigar smoke. In the back office, flanked by hanging sides of beef, sat Vincent Costa. Vincent was a deeply unhinged man who inherited his power through fear rather than respect. "Sit down, Leo," Vincent barked, tapping a thick manila folder on the stainless steel desk. "We got a break. A big one." Leo sat, keeping his expression neutral. "What kind of break, boss?" Detective Harris finally earned his bribe. Vincent sneered, revealing a mouth of crooked, smoke-stained teeth. "He pulled some sealed medical records. We found Maroney's ghost. The bastard has a daughter, a legitimate biological daughter he's been hiding in plain sight." Leo's blood ran ice-cold. He kept his hands resting casually on his knees, though his knuckles ached with the effort to keep from shaking. "Is that right?" Vincent flipped the folder open and tossed a glossy surveillance photograph across the desk. It was a picture of Kate walking out of the campus library, and in the blurred background, standing near the doors, was Leo. "We got eyes on her," Vincent said, leaning forward, his eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "And look at this. You're already in place. I knew you were a smart kid, Leo. Taking classes, doing recon on the enemy's bloodline. Brilliant." Leo swallowed hard, his throat dry. "She doesn't know who she is, Vincent. She thinks her dad was a salesman." "Who gives a damn what she thinks?" Vincent laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Maroney cares. That's what matters. We snatch her tomorrow night. We take her down to the shipping containers at the Calumet ports, and we call Maroney. We tell him he signs over the distribution routes, or we send his little girl back to him in pieces." "Tomorrow?" Leo asked, his voice hollow. "Yeah. Graziano's detail is light on Friday nights. Just him and one other goon. You get close to her, isolate her. We roll up, put 2 in Graziano's head, and throw her in the van. You do this right, Leo, and you're a made man." Leo left the meatpacking plant, feeling as though he were suffocating. The cold wind whipping off Lake Michigan did nothing to clear the panic rising in his chest. If the Costas took Kate, it would trigger a mob war that would turn the streets of Chicago into a river of blood, and Kate, sweet innocent Kate, who worried about paying her heating bill, would be collateral damage. He had to get to her. Leo found her walking near the Navy Pier Ferris wheel, wrapped in her oversized coat, clutching a cup of hot cider. The pier was relatively deserted, the winter chill keeping the tourists away. "Leo," she called out, her face lighting up as she saw him approaching. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Kate," Leo said, grabbing her by the shoulders. His intensity wiped the smile from her face. "We need to leave, right now." Why you're hurting me?" "I'm sorry," he muttered, loosening his grip but keeping a firm hold on her arm. He scanned the perimeter. 50 yards back, he spotted Thomas Graziano, leaning against a light post, smoking a cigarette. Maroney's guard dog was on duty. "Leo, you're scaring me," Kate said, pulling back slightly. "What is going on lately? I feel like I'm going crazy. I keep seeing the same men everywhere I go. Those guys from the library. I swear one of them is following me." "You aren't crazy," Leo said, his voice trembling slightly. "Kate, there is a lot about your life, about your family, that you don't know." Before he could explain, a black Lincoln Navigator rounded the corner at the end of the pier, its headlights off. It accelerated aggressively, the heavy tires chewing up the pavement as it hurtled directly toward them. Vincent Costa hadn't waited for Friday. He was making his move right now. "Get down," Leo roared. The side doors of the Navigator slid open before the vehicle even came to a complete halt, revealing 3 men in ski masks, armed with suppressed submachine guns. At the exact same moment, Thomas Graziano dropped his cigarette, reaching into his coat and drawing a massive silver revolver, sprinting toward them with shocking speed for a man his size. Kate screamed as the first suppressed shots cut through the freezing air, shattering the glass of a nearby ticket booth. Leo threw his arms around her, tackling the daughter of the Mafia Boss to the icy concrete as the 2 deadliest crime families in Chicago opened fire. The frozen concrete of Navy Pier erupted into a chaotic symphony of shattered glass and high-velocity lead. Leo pinned Kate behind the thick steel base of a decorative lamppost as a hail of bullets from the suppressed submachine guns tore through the ticket booth they had just been standing near. Kate pressed her hands over her ears, her breath coming in ragged, terrified gasps. The scent of ozone and pulverized ice filled the air. She squeezed her eyes shut, expecting to die on the freezing pavement, her nursing textbooks scattered uselessly in the snow. 50 yards away, Thomas Graziano proved exactly why Dominic Maroney paid him $5,000 a week. The aging hitman didn't dive for cover. He advanced, moving with a terrifying calculated precision that defied his heavy build. Graziano raised his silver point, .357 Magnum. The hand cannon roared, deafening in the winter silence. The first shot took the driver of the Lincoln Navigator through the windshield. The heavy SUV swerved violently, crashing into a concrete barricade. "Stay down," Leo commanded, his voice devoid of its usual quiet calm. It was a bark of pure tactical authority. Before his life, as a numbers runner for the Costas, Leo had spent 4 years as a Marine infantryman in Fallujah, a past he kept hidden from the mob. Now muscle memory took over. He drew his concealed 9mm, rising just enough to acquire a target. One of the masked Costa gunmen was stepping out of the crashed SUV, raising an automatic weapon toward Graziano's exposed flank. Leo fired twice. The double tap was flawless, catching the gunman in the chest and dropping him to the slushy ground. Graziano snapped his head toward Leo, his eyes widening in shock as he realized the college kid he had been glaring at in the library was a trained shooter returning fire on Costa soldiers. But there was no time to question it. The remaining 2 gunmen laid down a heavy barrage of suppressing fire, forcing Graziano to duck behind a concrete planter. A bullet clipped the planter, sending a jagged chunk of stone flying into Graziano's shoulder. The big man grunted, dropping his revolver as he clutched his collarbone blood, instantly blooming through his expensive cashmere coat. "Graziano is hit," Leo yelled over the gunfire. He grabbed Kate's shoulder, forcing her to look at him. "Kate, listen to me. When I start shooting, you run to that planter and you drag him behind it. You're a nurse. Keep him from bleeding out." "I can't, I don't know who that is," she sobbed, terror paralyzing her limbs. "He's your father's man, and he's the only reason we aren't dead," Leo roared, stripping away the last veil of his cover. "Go!" Leo stepped out from the lamp post, exposing himself to the shooters. He fired methodically, laying down suppressing fire that forced the Costa gunmen to duck behind the ruined chassis of the Navigator. Driven by pure adrenaline, Kate scrambled across the ice. She slid into the cover of the planter, just as Graziano slumped against it, his face pale. The street-hardened killer looked at the terrified 20-year-old girl with a mixture of awe and panic. "Miss Maroney." Graziano wheezed, his breathing shallow. "Get back. Get out of the line of fire." "Shut up and hold still." Kate snapped, a sudden fierce survival instinct kicking in. She ripped off her thick woolen scarf, balled it up, and pressed it brutally hard against the arterial bleed near his collarbone. Graziano hissed in pain, but nodded in grim respect. Leo dropped the empty magazine from his pistol, slamming a fresh one home. "They're falling back," he shouted. The wail of Chicago police sirens echoed in the distance, bouncing off the skyscrapers downtown. The remaining Costa men, knowing the police response time in this district was less than 3 minutes, abandoned their dead and sprinted toward a secondary getaway car parked near the loading docks. Leo ran to the planter, grabbing Graziano by his uninjured arm. "Can you walk?" "My SUV. Black Suburban. 50 feet north." Graziano grunted, tossing Leo the keys with a blood-slicked hand. They practically carried the heavy man to the armored vehicle. Leo threw Graziano into the back seat, while Kate scrambled in beside him, keeping the pressure on his wound. Leo jumped into the driver's seat, the engine roaring to life. He slammed it into reverse, spun the wheel, and tore out of the Navy Pier parking lot, merging recklessly onto Lower Wacker Drive, just as the first squad cars arrived on the scene above. The underground labyrinth of Lower Wacker was bathed in the sickly yellow glow of sodium lights. The tires squealed as Leo navigated the subterranean streets, checking his rearview mirror every 5 seconds to ensure they weren't being followed. In the back seat, the silence was suffocating, broken only by Graziano's ragged breathing and the hum of the SUV's heater. Kate's hands were covered in blood. She stared at the back of Leo's head, the pieces of the puzzle violently snapping together in her mind. "Miss Maroney," she whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She looked down at Graziano. "Who is my father?" Graziano closed his eyes, leaning his head against the tinted window. "Dominic Maroney, head of the Chicago outfit. Your mother, she made him swear to keep you out of the life. She wanted you to be normal. He bought half the city council, including Alderman Davies, just to keep your birth record sealed. I've been watching you since you were in kindergarten, kid." Kate felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. Her entire life, the student loans, the struggling to pay rent, the quiet grief of her mother's funeral, it was all a curated existence. She was the heiress to an empire of extortion and violence. She slowly looked up at the rearview mirror, meeting Leo's dark eyes. "And you? Were you watching me since kindergarten, too?" Leo gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles cracked. "No. I work for the Costa family. I'm a numbers runner. Vincent Costa found out you existed through a dirty cop. I was supposed to get close to you, find your vulnerabilities. Costa was coming tonight to kidnap you. He wanted to use you as leverage to strip your father of his ports. Kate recoiled as if she had been struck. The quiet, solitary boy from the library, the one who had brought her coffee and listened to her complain about anatomy exams, was a spy. He was an operative for a rival cartel. You lied to me. She breathed tears of absolute betrayal, cutting tracks through the grime on her cheeks. I did, Leo admitted, his voice rough with emotion. But I didn't let them take you. I just threw my life away to protect you, Kate. The Costas will butcher me for what I just did on that pier. But I couldn't let them hurt you. Pull over, Kate ordered, her voice trembling but finding a sudden icy core. Kate, we aren't safe. I said pull over. Leo slammed on the brakes, pulling the heavy SUV into an abandoned subterranean loading bay beneath the financial district. He turned in his seat, expecting her to run. Instead, Kate didn't move. She looked at the blood on her hands, the blood of her father's hitman, a man who had just taken a bullet for her. The innocence she had woken up with that morning was dead, shattered on the ice of Navy Pier. She thought of her mother who had lied every day of her life to keep her safe, only for that safety to be an illusion. She wasn't Kate Hayes, the struggling nursing student, anymore. She was a Maroney. And she was being hunted. She looked at Leo, her hazel eyes hardening into something resembling polished steel. You know how Costa operates. You know his routes, his safe houses, his men. Leo nodded slowly. I know everything. Good, Kate said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. Take us to my father. The Maroney estate in Lake Forest was a sprawling stone fortress hidden behind wrought iron gates and ancient oak trees. When Leo pulled the bullet-riddled Suburban up to the guardhouse, a dozen heavily armed men surrounded the vehicle in seconds. 10 minutes later, Kate stood in the center of a mahogany-paneled study that smelled of expensive scotch and old leather. Dominic Maroney sat behind a massive desk. He was a man in his late 50s, his hair silver at the temples, radiating an aura of absolute, undisputed power. Yet as he looked at Kate, his ruthless facade crumbled. He saw the ghost of the nurse he had loved 2 decades ago. He saw his ultimate failure. Kate! Dominic rasped, standing up slowly. Don't, Kate said, holding up a blood-stained hand. The gesture was so commanding that the mob boss actually stopped in his tracks. My mother is dead. You left us alone to pretend I was safe, and tonight I was almost kidnapped and murdered by a man named Vincent Costa. The illusion is over. Dominic's eyes flared with a lethal paternal rage. He glared at Leo, who stood by the door flanked by 4 armed guards. And this piece of filth Graziano tells me he's a Costa boy. Why is he breathing in my house? Because he saved my life, Kate stated, stepping between her father and Leo. And because we are going to use him to end the Costa family. Tonight. Dominic narrowed his eyes, assessing the young woman standing before him. The terrified college girl had been burned away in the crossfire. In her place stood a woman who possessed his blood, his intellect, and a terrifyingly calm understanding of leverage. Vincent Costa operates out of a meat-packing facility in the Fulton Market District. Leo spoke up, his voice steady, despite the guns pointed at his back. But he doesn't sleep there. He sleeps at a penthouse overlooking Millennium Park. He uses an underground private garage. If you hit him at the meat-packing plant, it's a fortress. But I know his transit schedule. I know exactly when he moves. I don't trust a rat, Dominic spat. You don't have to trust him. You have to trust me, Kate said, stepping forward, leaning her hands on her father's desk. Costa wants me. He thinks I'm a soft target, a civilian who doesn't know the rules of the game. So we give him exactly what he wants. Dominic's face went pale. Absolutely not. I am not putting you in the crosshairs again. I am already in the crosshairs. Kate fired back, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Costa won't stop. If he doesn't get me today, he'll try next week or next month. The only way to remove the target from my back is to remove the man who painted it there. We set a trap. For the next 2 hours, the study turned into a war room. Kate, utilizing a brilliant methodical logic honed by years of intense academic study, helped her father and his capos map out the strategy. Leo provided the tactical intelligence, detailing the exact blind spots in Costa's security detail and the layout of his transit routes. It was a staggering reversal. The numbers runner and the nursing student were orchestrating the downfall of Chicago's second-largest crime syndicate. At 3 a.m., the plan went into motion. Kate, wearing a Kevlar vest beneath a designer trench coat provided by her father's people, sat in the back of a decoy Lincoln Town car. Leo was in the front passenger seat, a loaded M4 carbine resting across his lap. They parked in a desolate alleyway near the Fulton Market, fully exposed. Leo dialed a burner phone. He called Vincent Costa's private line. "Leo, you son of a bitch!" Costa's voice hissed through the speaker. "You have 30 seconds to explain why my men are dead, and you aren't." "I have the girl, Vincent," Leo lied smoothly, his voice laced with manufactured panic. "Graziano went crazy, started shooting everything. I managed to grab her in the chaos. I'm 3 blocks from the plant, pinned down in an alley. Maroney's guys are sweeping the grid. I need an extraction now, or we both lose her." There was a heavy pause on the line. Greed overrode Vincent Costa's paranoia. "Keep her head down. I'm coming out myself with the heavy hitters." The line went dead. Kate looked at Leo, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. "He bought it." "He bought it," Leo confirmed, racking the charging handle of his rifle. He looked back at her, his eyes softening. "Whatever happens next, Kate, I'm sorry for how we met, but I am not sorry that I met you." Kate reached forward, her hand finding his shoulder, gripping it tightly. "We finish this. Together." Minutes later, a convoy of 4 black SUVs roared out of the subterranean garage of the meatpacking plant. Vincent Costa, eager to secure his prize, led the charge. But as the convoy turned onto the deserted street leading to the alley, the trap snapped shut. A garbage truck, driven by one of Maroney's men, aggressively reversed out of a side street, violently T-boning the lead SUV and blocking the narrow road. Before Costa's men could even unbuckle their seatbelts, Dominic Maroney's tactical teams, positioned on the rooftops and fire escapes above, opened fire. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Kate watched through the tinted windows of the town car as the empire that had hunted her was dismantled in under 3 minutes of concentrated, devastating crossfire. When the smoke finally cleared and the agonizing silence returned to the freezing Chicago night, Dominic Maroney himself walked over to the wreckage of Costa's vehicle to ensure the job was done. The war was over before the city even woke up. A week later, Kate stood on the balcony of a luxury high-rise overlooking the shimmering expanse of Lake Michigan. She wore a tailored black suit, her hair pulled back sharply. She was no longer cramming for exams in the Cudahy Library. She had deferred her semester. The nursing textbooks were packed away in boxes. She turned as the glass door slid open. Leo stepped out onto the balcony. He wore a sharp, dark suit that matched hers, moving with the quiet confidence of a man who no longer had to hide in the shadows. He had been officially brought into the Maroney family, answering only to her. "Your father called," Leo said, standing beside her, looking out at the city skyline. "Alderman Davies signed off on the port zoning changes. The Costa territories are fully absorbed. You have complete control of the logistics division." "Good," Kate murmured, taking a sip from a crystal glass of bourbon. She looked at the man who had lied to her, saved her, and ultimately helped her claim her throne. And the library, bought and paid for in cash. Leo smirked. Endowed in your mother's name. No one will ever touch it. Kate smiled, a genuine warm expression that hadn't entirely vanished, just hardened into something unbreakable. She reached out her fingers, lacing through Leo's. She wasn't just the Mafia Boss's daughter anymore. She was the boss in training. And in the ruthless underworld of Chicago, she finally had someone she could sit with. From a struggling nursing student to the ruthless heir of the Chicago outfit, Kate's rebirth proves that sometimes the only way to survive the darkness is to become it. Did you enjoy this explosive mafia drama and the ultimate tactical takedown of the Costa family? Let us know what you thought of Kate and Leo's deadly alliance in the comments below. Be sure to hit that like button, share this incredible real-life story with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling underworld sagas.